discussion regarding
here or there, but what you see in a lot of locations is you actually have businesses put those in their parking lot.
What was that one?
Take, for example, Runza, take, for example, Walmart, take, for example, that's what a lot of businesses are doing it as an ad addition. The reason to stop there is they put it in their parking
I'm
lot.
sure it's not a
in city
complimentary.
files, and so this is from one.
No, there's a lot of cost to it because of the electrical input
It's at
to it,
least
but that's that
it's
bill
the
that the federal
most she
government
could
planned,
find
but a lot of
in terms of
businesses are
policy
taking it,
or
putting it in their
anything
business plans,
governing
so that I have
the
that
way
in my
that
parking lot.
board operates.
Like, let's say somebody puts in a old Chicago office, they put it in their parking lot, you stop,
I figured as
you have
much
lunch,
too.
Well, you have
Runs it to, is doing that.
and Walmart has it around here.
So,
I haven't had to worry about that yet.
no, it's yours. That's yours.
I said, that hasn't been my worry
Okay,
yet.
it's yours.
I don't think it ever will be, but it could be.
Afterwards.
Morning, Bill.
Morning, Mike. I'm good. Probably better than I deserve, so. Nobody likes to hear me talk. If I'm talking, it's not a good sign.
I'll remember that.
That's what my wife tells me too, so.
And your little girl.
Stay quiet.
What happened to me in 2007 when I slipped on.
Can't turn my microphone off.
That one does not turn.
You're either off or you're on or you're on.
If it's on, is it red?
I wasn't supposed to be able to do this though, the therapy works, because it did say.
Lane would, when Lane's sitting there for city council meetings, he'd like to turn off.
I'm left-handed. Oh.
He's always got to be over there. Bring some duct tape in and fix it. You probably got some in your truck, don't you?
I got a knife on me right now too, so I like your first idea.
Good morning. It's 9 o'clock. We're going to start this meeting. A current copy of the Open Meetings Act of Nebraska is posted on the wall at the back of the council chambers. Let's do a roll call to order, please.
Wilkie,
Yes.
Storosco,
President?
Lucas, Patterson, Mendenhall.
Okay, next item is to approve the minutes of the February 9th, 2023 meeting. Any additions or corrections? Roll call?
Wilkie,
Yes.
Storosco,
Yes.
Lucas,
Yes.
Patterson.
Okay. Next item this morning is the review of the redevelopment plan and cost-benefit analysis for the exit 179 Wilkinson redevelopment project. Mr. Bacon.
Mr. Chairman and members of the Redevelopment Authority, Mike Bacon, counsel for the CRA. So this is the proposed plan for an 8-lot subdivision, 6 of which would have buildings on it, proposed by Wilkinson Development. The redevelopment plan has a number of proposed structures out there, which would be truck stop, a couple of restaurants, office buildings, some headquarters building, and 50,000 square foot retail space, which is a significant development out there. The piece, there's going to be significant infrastructure costs and site development costs, because that has been an unloved piece of property, just slightly over 74 acres. Has been declared blighted and substandard, along with the sustainable beef site when that was done. Development will take a number of years, obviously, because it's going to be significant development. We believe that looking at the proposed valuation, which is different than the investment that will be out there, much less, that it will, at full development, should have an assessed value of something north of $16 million. The problem that the redeveloper has is that site development is significant, over $5 million with site preparation and all of the infrastructure that goes out there. So the doing the analysis on where we are in terms of TIF generated, it would only pay off a TIF bond of 2.5, 2.6 over time. It proposes a phased development over 6 years. Your chairman has visited with me about shortening that, and so I proposed a resolution that does that. Details for this project, remember that the plan is just basically an outline, and all of the hard data and obligations are set forth in a redevelopment contract that would be, 30 or 40 pages. So the issues on access to the campground, what you do with access off of the highway coming in, and those sorts of things would be set forth in that, and those restrictions and who pays for that. The project, as all projects do for TIF, you have to go through a cost-benefit analysis, which is included in the redevelopment plan. Short version is 6 structures on 8 lots, 2 lots. One would be for a pond, and one would be for a park along the river. Significant parking for semis and so forth. 98 jobs at full build-out, which is pretty significant, millions of dollars in wages. The interesting part of this thing is we were provided prospective sales at full build-out, and computed that as part of what the sales tax revenue would be for the city of North Platte. I'm told that I used the term Gothenburg, so if last time I was in front of this a prior group, so if you want to contribute that sales tax to Gothenburg, I'm sure that they'd accept it. The interesting thing, we'd see about $300,000 worth of assessed value or real property taxes, increase in real property taxes that would be directed towards TIF. Sales tax revenue on full build-out, as proposed, would equal that. So, and all of that, that's local sales tax. So that's a pretty significant piece. In terms of the other elements of the plan that you need to take a look at are what's the impact to school population. You have substantial excess capacity at the present time for students in the school system, and likely most of the 98 jobs would be folks that are already here, so we don't expect an impact there. Fire suppression and police, you have similar truck stops, although this would be much more than a truck stop, and we believe those you shouldn't have any additional costs there. The big one to consider is what happens in terms of community services, streets, street sewer, water, and who pays for those. So as part of the redevelopment plan and ultimately the redevelopment contract, the redeveloper would pay for those and utilize TIF perhaps, but again, the TIF eligible expenses are double what TIF would generate. So those are the major areas on the redevelopment plan. Clarine is here to answer any questions on what are you going to do out there and those sorts of things. So if you'd like to ask her on those questions, or have those questions, I'm sure she'd be glad to answer those. I'll be glad to answer anything on the proposed build-out. This isn't my first date on a project of this size. It's going to take some years to develop, because this is a big ask. And Greg was telling me earlier that site has a bunch of sawdust in it, so it's going to take a lot of work, even extra concrete to make sure that the streets are solid out there and so forth for stabilization. So any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Any questions? Apparently none.
I'm sorry, I didn't see Mark here. Clarine's a much smilier face than
He's just stealthier than I am.
Good morning.
Clarine Eichhoff, 8909 South Buffalo Road, Chief of Operations for Wilkinson Development. CEO is also here. You have any questions for us?
I had a question last time on entrance and exits. I feel that there will have to be an additional exit from the interstate. Am I wrong? And if so, have you discussed it with them?
Additional exit from the interstate. I mean, we all know how the interstate works and the breaks between, so I don't know exactly what you're referring to there.
The only way to get to you is Halligan Drive, right, and First Reed. I just wondered if that's adequate.
It's very similar to all of our projects. We have one exit from our major truck stops. So like Fat Dog South, for instance, everything flows out onto the main highway, one exit. I mean, you could take it back through residential, but I don't think that's what we want to do here either, is take it through the RV park or anything like that. We're talking about high traffic semi trucks. So the exit that's provided is adequate. We have to work with the state of Nebraska eventually to go through what that looks like. I know I heard you guys before the meeting talking about their plans for the corridor and what, 4-lane versus the 2 that exists now. That's all in the works, but again, that's higher than us. That's the state of Nebraska, and they'll have a say in all of this. Once our plans are submitted, it will go through them.
And I would guess you anticipate if they do make that a 4-lane, it'll come on your side of the right-of-way, and that would just be a little bit of adjustment, of shift maybe in your plan, just shaving off whatever feet you have to on the
Right.
west side.
I know that TC, Tom Werblow, and Brent Berklin with the city, and Mark Wilkinson have all been in touch with the state of Nebraska. That is the plan, is that some of that would come into on our side. But we're trying to be proactive in all of those plans with Brent and Tom and the design, so that we make sure that we don't have to go back and do it again. Because of course that wouldn't be cost effective for us. And we don't want to jeopardize income eventually when we get this thing going, when we pay all of this money to put the construction up and finance it. We don't want to go backwards. So we can't go backwards. So yeah, we're taking all of that into consideration.
I think perhaps, I don't know if that's what you're speaking of, Edie, but on actual Halligan Drive, to make that 4 lanes from the intersection where you turn into here up to the interstate, is that kind of what you're speaking of? Because that's kind of what their map indicates a little bit, and if they go all the way with it, I think that's.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, obviously you have to work with the state and that they were compliant, feel the same way you do.
Yeah, it'd be very similar to like what Love's is across the interstate. They kind of have the same setup. We're going north, they're going south, but other than that, it's the exact same setup.
have a side lane off the main 2 lanes so the trucks can queue up in there and then pull out into there.
Yep. In talking with Brent, there's a left-hand turn, a through lane, and then a right-hand turn.
Any other questions from the committee?
We do have a little bit of a question from a developer standpoint of the more aggressive resolution that Mike Bacon referred to, and what your thoughts are on that. It's a little complicated from our standpoint to, totally forecast that, and it is based on the divided aspect, I believe, of how it's written. But just so you know, this is one large redevelopment plan that's being submitted. We're not breaking it up in the TIF ask. And the reason why we're doing that is because we're trying to finance the road all the way through and the fill all the way through. So the infrastructure that's needed to do the entire site at one time requires us to do the redevelopment plan all at once. We don't want to do like concrete halfway and then all of a sudden you got your RV park driving on gravel and potholes and everything, because that's still going to create, that traffic is going to get there whether or not it's on our concrete or on the asphalt. The trucks will find a way. It needs to be done all at once, and that's the reason why we have it all together.
I can address that. That there were some comments made to me that made me reach out to the last chairman and just see what the history was for like a standard protocol. And he indicated that this committee had operated under a 3-year initial redevelopment period generally, and then there would be an action to amend that agreement once that period stretched on, which has been done in the past. And so that was the initial protocol. When I talked to Mr. Bacon, I think 3 years is too aggressive on a magnitude of this for sure. And there was I was trying to get some feelings of what people would approve to not be an issue within. I think there's general support, but there were some details that was being asked of me. And it was kind of a 3 to 5 year time period, and so frankly I picked 4. As that's how that came out, to try to get resolution all the way through. And I think the expectation would be, if the project goes on longer than that, there's a process to come back through this committee to get an amendment to that redevelopment plan, which has happened on other projects. And so based on that and some other people that have asked me questions, that's how that came about.
Just to give you an example of our position, we're working in Hall County with the state of Nebraska on our Grand Island truck stop. Mark purchased that property in 2018. We signed with our contractor yesterday. That's 5 years. So when the state of Nebraska gets involved, we're trying to be as progressive and as aggressive as possible, but we still are hostage to what their timelines and what they decide and their approvals and all that government process, which I know you guys can appreciate all that. But so just wanted to bring that up, and we know that we'll probably have to be in front of you again, but thank you for 4 years, but anything you can do to push that out any further, we appreciate that too.
And I think of the way it's written, isn't it 4 years beyond 24, Mr. Bacon?
Yeah, there's a difference between when project starts and when TIF goes into effect. So it is entirely possible that it would be 4 years from 2024, January 1 of 2024. Depending on when they get their first structure up, it could be pushed out a year. So you have to use it from what's called the effective date in the redevelopment contract. So depending on how fast they get a structure up, it could be 4 years from next January, or it could be 4 years from the following January. If you don't do it that way, you've effectively cut it down possibly to 2, possibly to 3 years. So It depends on when that structure goes taxable. And just because they do dirt work doesn't mean the taxes are gonna increase for purposes of TIF. So they've gotta get a structure up. And there's significant, I can go through this when we do TIF 101, how you count, but, yeah, it's 4 years from the division date of taxes, which gives them essentially one build year to get going, so, yeah. And, you're correct, it's been more than 3 years on multiple, phases, so, yeah. So you understand, the phasing would be the first set of structures go up, then the 15-year period for TIF starts on those, not the whole site. And the next set of structures go up, it's 15 years on those. And so those phases, your current resolution would contemplate 4 phases. And if they don't get that piece in, then they would obviously come back and ask for an extension, so.
I think we're just asking not to complicate it, give us some leeways and some flexibility to be able to do this project right, not be forced by any one factor. So, do you have any other
Understand.
questions?
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Mark, you want to speak?
Yeah, Mark Wilkinson. I appreciate all of your input and being on this board. We need good people to make these kind of decisions. I can tell you that, right now, we paid over $1 million in property taxes in Lincoln County last year. We've got 300 employees. When we had the Taco Bells, we had as many as 400 employees. The beef packing plant is projected to have 875 employees. We're not asking for a third of the incentives that you've given them already for what we do. We've been involved in North Platte for a long time. We're not going anywhere. This project is, to me, it's bringing 7 shovel-ready lots to the marketplace right now that have their own legal descriptions, own tax ID numbers, gives us the ability to sell those lots off, to develop them. It puts us in a situation where we don't have to use one banker with one legal description for the entire project, which makes it a lot more attractive and movable. Right now, I own the road that goes to the campground. It's on private land, and they have an easement across that road to get access. We're going to change that and build a road to city specifications in order to create those 7 shovel-ready lots. I can't fathom why the county and why you in your position wouldn't be in favor of getting those in place and established. One of the biggest problems as a developer is once those lots are created, they go on the tax rolls. I start paying property taxes on them if they're not TIF'd. But we felt, I can do this project without doing the excess lots, the other 7 lots. But I think for the county and for our city, these lots are going to be highly marketable and highly ready to go. And I think that helps our city and our county. I think we're on the same team. I hope we are. So I think this project is important to the city to get it done. Don't handcuff us and give us a bunch of haircuts on the get-go that make it so that we change our mind and want to just do the truck stop or do something different. Let's do the full project. It's going to be good for North Platte.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Public part of it. Brent, could you come up? And I had a couple of questions asked of me in a project like this. If the state requires certain things on that right-of-way prior to the road being added onto to be a 4-lane, how does that work between the redeveloper and the city? Is that all a state cost? So let's say they want another lane on the existing 2-lane because of the truck traffic for that turn, because that'll be a high, high volume business, I'm sure. How does that work from the city's standpoint in deals like this? I think we've got a great chance here to make the east side flow way better than the west side of that Halligan, Newberry corridor there. But so like, how does that, from the city's perspective, how does that work in engineering? And I know there's a plan for the more lanes later, but for right now, how does that work?
Good morning, committee. Thanks for your time. And I'm Brent Berkland, the city engineer. And Clarine, I think, did a pretty good job of a little bit of the background history that us as a city has talked with NDOT, the local District 6, on. There's a lot of moving parts to this. From the standpoint, Newberry is part of the Build Nebraska. If you don't remember, there was a Build Nebraska, and North Platte is on the list to have a 4-lane overpass put in over Newberry. Right now it's 2. They'll add another bridge. They're gonna add another river bridge, and it'll be 4 lanes to tie south Newberry all the way up to Highway 30. That's part of the Build Nebraska project. It's not, there's some weeds on how do we get there. They haven't done the design yet, but that's getting closer and closer. It's based on sales tax. Once the money's there, then they can do the project for the design, and then they can move into construction. So it's a little ways out. But we visited with the state on where they project. One concern was brought up was, where is that 4-lane right-of-way going to be? Because that road, Halligan, is really steep compared to Newberry. And Newberry is that elevation because of the river bridge and the interstate bridge. It's fixed because of those structures. So everything has to come up to meet that. And so this site is really expensive to develop because of all of these things. They're gonna have a lot of fill to make that decent for any vehicles. Right now, it's just an access. And it's a little bit of a, I think, adventure for the campers to go up that gravel / asphalt up. It's very steep. And so they have to flatten it out and put that in consideration with the new 4 lanes. So that's been looked at and talked with the state. The state's non-committal on that 4-lane location because they haven't allocated funds. So it's doing our best projection. It's an engineer estimate on where that would locate and where it would land. And then, as Clarine mentioned, there's a state permitting process as far as doing a traffic study on what that intersection will look like. There is a right turn lane right now going into the campground. If you go out and look, they converted the shoulder into a right turn lane. So that's there right now. That'd be part of the traffic study to see what components need to be done. And what has been talked about is a 3-lane exit coming out for the new Halligan, if you want to call it that. So there would be room for a left turn movement, a left turn through and a right turn, and a lane going in, and it'd be a wider road section. So those things all be looked at. And to give you a level of comfort, Loves and Flying J, they have driveways across from each other. And that's not signalized right now. It's a 4-lane with a turn lane. But just to kind of give you an idea, there'll be improvements that some of these things are probably going to get stacked depending on what the state schedule is. I'm hoping we can keep pushing as a city, but also probably politically, we're going to need to push, encourage the state to look at our project sooner with sustainable beef and other projects that are starting, in my opinion, starting to tip the need to have this looked at sooner. But it's still going to take a while. If they started today on it, it's not going to be built in a year. It's probably going to be 5 years before they would, make some significant headway. It's a 3-year environmental review process on top of the design and those type of things. That's a lot I just threw at you. Did that cover a whole bunch of things in one swoop? Or did you have more that you wanted me to refine on that, Greg?
Well, in fairness to this developer, I guess, do you foresee anything after the fact that would affect this development from them, that the city would come back and say, well, because we had this extra whatever, Or will they know that, everything up front, and will they know the setback that the state,
Yeah,
so that they don't have to have more expenses later?
that's correct. Those components are being looked at with the state to the best of we're able to identify like the east right-of-way of Newberry right now, where it's at. And looking at extending that line straight south, making sure that the new road improvements match that elevation-wise.
Okay.
And so in that respect, they won't have to redo any of the future Halligan, East Halligan, if you want to say. And it'll minimize their impact. Now, when they put a 4-lane in, that's going to be disruptive to everybody, but at least it won't disrupt the road. We won't have to redo the road right in front of their business. So I don't foresee, I mean, the planning should be such that up front, they know what's going to be required right at the beginning. And then it'll be up to the state 5 years from now, but we'll have input from them, hopefully to eliminate, or hopefully worst case scenario, minimize any impacts in the future.
So, Brett, just to clarify, you mean in 5 years they'd have the plan and the permission to do it? They wouldn't start construction and be done in 5 years, there'd just be an actual plan by the end of 5 years?
Correct. I mean, it's probably going to take, I bet, 3 or 4 years to build it with the overpass. It depends on who does it, things like that, but doing 2 bridge structures, and they're big, so it's probably a 5-year design window, I'm guessing.
So how much buildup are they going to do?
We're at, maybe I should ask you the road. From some of the preliminary information I saw, to keep the slope reasonable, you know, as the approach coming up, there's areas that are probably 5 feet just on the road, 5 to 6 feet.
Above what it is now?
Correct. If you've been out there and driven it, it comes up really steep, so you have to flatten that off, so you'll be filling that area until you get, it's probably a few hundred feet east to make it a more gentle slope for trucks and the traveling public to get up to Newberry's elevation.
So you anticipate that road to be improved further than their lot line? In other words, down into the neighbors?
Typically, I mean, there's a couple things. One, from the standpoint of the developer, they just need, the standard city policy is they have to develop their lot, you know, to their lot line. From there east will be on other people's property, and that'll be up to them on, you know, if they want it to be a road and how they want that to be, or a street, how they want to do with that. I mean, that'll be a separate item as far as that business and those people. I mean, I guess they could consider that as an option. I don't know if they'd want it, but.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak this morning? Okay. So we have in front of us a resolution recommending the city council approve the redevelopment plan. And also we need to then adopt the cost benefit analysis and other materials relating to exit 179 for the Wilkinson project. Is there a motion of such?
I would second.
The action would be simply to adopt the resolution because it incorporates the cost-benefit analysis in that approval.
And the resolution would be 2023-1, would be the resolution number, so you have a copy of that. So the motion to adopt resolution number 2023-1. Any additional questions or discussion? Okay, let's vote. Roll call?
Wilkie?
Yes.
Storosco?
Yes?
Lucas?
Yes.
Patterson?
Yes.
Okay, this will be forwarded on to the city council for their action.
It will be on April 4th agenda.
Any other business this morning? Okay. If not, we're adjourned.
Mike? And Greg, if you have. Has anybody ever structured something like this so that it takes effect after environmental and state roads in place? Like, they're gonna wait